That's very important to understand. You see, there's one thing that anybody who wants to study ancient or classical or even medieval Indian text must understand, that nearly all the famous texts of India, they were not written by a single person within his or her lifetime. You see, which is the most revered text? ऋग्वेद. अब ऋग्वेद में तो कोई बड़े ऋषि और कोई छोटे ऋषि नहीं है ना. Is there a classification that these are the top rishis, tenure faculty, and these are the adjuncts? क्यों साहब? ये एडजंक्ट्स हैं, आते हैं, पढ़ाते हैं, चले जाते हैं, इनकी भी इतनी इम्पोर्टेंस नहीं है. No, every richa of the Rig Veda, whether written by a male or by a female, whether a small contribution or a big contribution, is equally sacred. So, why this kind of idea? Because knowledge was not considered as something which belonged to a particular mind or a particular era or a particular class or a particular nation or a particular language. It was always seen whether it is worth it or not. Is it something which will stand the test of time? That was the criteria. So, all the richas of the Rig Veda put into the Samhitas are equally valuable. And in the sense that they were not specific to the mind of the person who composed them. Now mark these words. In the sense that they were not specific to the mind or the thought of the person who composed them, in that sense they were apaurushaya. They were not personally brought into existence. They were not his. They were inspired. They descended, so to speak. They are therefore apaurushaya. When you say the Veda is unpaurushaya, there are many debates. All the time people are debating. And my friend Kionrad Elst is all the time debating on this. Hindus, why do they call Vedas apaurushaya? In this sense or that sense? Well, it's very simple. Because they are not of a time, place and person. They are not judged that way. They are not evaluated that way. Obviously, they came out of the mouth or the tongue pronunciation of some individual, and the names are given, who is the rishi, but still they are apaurushaya. And that is not something which happened then, that is something which happens even now. My teacher, Acharya K.C. Brihaspati, he wrote a wonderful verse on Parvati's dance, Parvati Lasyam, in Sanskrit. And I think he took only a few hours to compose those lines. And when he had finished, he had this conviction that it came to him. And that he wrote it down. Beautiful verses, Mahesh Mauli Mallika Milin Milinda Gunjitam. It's in the same chanda as Jata Kataha Sabrama. So he said, I have never been able to write like this again. I never contemplated or thought about it, it just came to me. And it is his, he hasn't stolen it. But nobody else has claimed it. So if this experience can happen now, that it came to him, and that poetry comes to you, it's a very universal idea. The ancient Greeks called it phia. You just descended. You were so inspired that you spoke. The idea that the best of Vani or the best of composition is not personal, is universal. It's not specifically Indian. But in India, we have developed a whole investigative theory about it. You know, what is Vani and what is speech, and it is in 4 sections, Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari, and we have analyzed it all that in terms of how meaning is generated, etc., etc. But this idea that it descends, that it is something from not the person. Coming back to what I was saying, that the major texts of India, they were not claimed to be composed by a single person, although they go in the name of a single person. Like Kautilya's Arthashastra is attributed to Kautilya, but Kautilya himself is mentioning so many opinions in it on different matters. Bharata's Natya Shastra is mentioning so many other acharyas constantly. As contrasted to this, you have the classical works of Greek authors. So take a work like the Poetics by Aristotle. So it's very well known that this is what this one single man wrote, and probably in this year, 300 and something, right? Or any other work, you know, Crito of Plato or Phaedrus, or all these works, they are of a person, of a time, well recorded. They are a personal opinion, if you want to say so. Now, because the Europeans revived their whole tradition of learning, patterned after the ancient Greeks and Romans, so the ancient Greek and Roman texts were their paradigm for everything. So they were constantly judging the Indian texts by the example of Greek authors. And therefore, long discussions whether Kautilya's text is of a single person or of 5 persons. In India, nobody was worried about it, you know. They accepted it was a compilation, that it was a collection. जब हमारा वेद ही कलेक्शन है, संहिता है, संहिता का मतलब होता है इकट्ठा किया हुआ, तो फिर और दूसरा ग्रंथ अगर होगा तो क्या मुश्किल है? जब वेद को ही हमने संहिता माना है, तो किसी भी और ग्रंथ को हम कई लोगों का ग्रंथ मान लेंगे. It's as good as that. Therefore, a particular Shastra talks about not a single person, the work or the idea of a single person or an age, but about a tradition. And Manu's Dharma Shastra again or Arthashastra of Kautilya fall in the same system. Now I am saying this all to bring the fact before you. And what I have said is not a conjecture. Everybody would agree to it. Yet we find all kinds of debate going on. Whether this was written by an upper caste or a lower caste. Manu ne likha hai. Now most people say Brahmanvadi, Manuvadi. Manu was not a Brahmin. Manu was a king. Manu तो राजा थे ना. मनु जंगल में तो नहीं रहते थे. पर मायावती तो सोचती हैं कि वो ब्राह्मण थे. सारा मीडिया यही सोचता है. And Manuvadi means Brahmanvadi. But the text was not written by a Brahmin. If you believe it was written by somebody called Manu or in the parampara of Manu or a line of kings, then it is a Kshatriya text. And Buddha was a Kshatriya. No denying, no confusion. Manu, you may contest or you may give all kinds of arguments to doubt his Kshatriyahood, but nobody can doubt the Kshatriyahood of Gautam Siddhartha. So all the Pitakas and all the things which were so-called heard by disciples from the enlightened ones, they don't belong to the Brahminical class. But there, of course, the problem is different, because Buddha is looked upon as anti-Brahmin. But then Buddha is Kshatriya. He is not lower caste. You see? Certain very simple things about the history of our texts have been just put aside. You know, what is that Latin phrase, suppressio veri, and